Muhammad Ali's philosophy begins with a radical assertion of self. He was not simply a man who boxed in the ring, he was a man who redefined what it meant to live with conviction. His words, "I am the greatest," were more than boastful slogans. They were affirmations of identity, rituals of self-creation, weapons against doubt and fear. At the core of Ali's philosophy lies the belief that identity is not something passively inherited but something actively crafted through courage, discipline, and relentless faith. To understand Ali's outlook is to see that self-belief is not arrogance but a form of survival. For a black man in mid-20th century America, stripped by society of dignity and value, proclaiming greatness was not mere vanity, it was rebellion. Ali's insistence that he was beautiful, that he was great, that he was destined for greatness, created a new metaphysical space in which he existed as free. His language shaped his reality. He transformed metaphors into lived truths. This is a philosophy of identity as performance, but performance not in the sense of pretense. It is performance as reality-shaping action, as an existential stance that challenges the narratives imposed upon him by others. Ali's refusal to be called by his birth name, Cassius Clay, was itself an expression of this philosophy. For him, Clay was a slave name, a relic of subjugation. Rejecting it was an act of liberation. Adopting Muhammad Ali was not only a religious choice but also a philosophical one, a declaration that one's true name is chosen, not forced. He refused to allow the world to name him. In that rejection, he embodied a principle that identity is inseparable from agency. No one can truly know who you are except yourself, and no one can dictate what you will call yourself or how you will live. That simple act of renaming became an embodiment of his metaphysics of freedom. His philosophy of self-belief echoes ancient traditions. In the Stoic sense, he controlled his inner perception and refused to give power to external insult. In the existentialist sense, he insisted that essence is forged by acts of will. In the spiritual sense, he grounded himself in faith and divine recognition, knowing that his worth did not come from the world's recognition but from God and from his own unbreakable confidence. But Ali's self-belief was not empty bravado. Behind the words was a discipline that justified them. His philosophy was that greatness is not merely spoken but also trained into being. The hours of road work, the pain of sparring, the repeated sacrifices to prepare for battle were themselves affirmations of his words. "I am the greatest" was a phrase made true through sweat, through routine, through enduring boredom, through facing exhaustion and still persisting. Ali fused word and action, belief and discipline. His greatness was born in the gym before it was proven in the ring. This reveals his philosophy of embodiment. The body is the vessel of belief. What one says must be backed by what one does. This unity of speech and action is rare, and Ali's philosophy teaches that the truest kind of self-belief is inseparable from effort. Ali's philosophy of self-belief extended to his community. He understood that his greatness was not for him alone but also for every child who watched him defy the odds. By proclaiming himself beautiful, by proclaiming himself great, he gave others permission to believe the same about themselves. His victories were communal, symbolic affirmations that oppression could be resisted, that pride could be reclaimed. His personal philosophy became a collective philosophy of empowerment. In this sense, Ali did not live for himself alone. He carried a cultural burden, turning his self-belief into a philosophy of liberation that transcended the ring. What is the deepest insight from this philosophy of self-belief? It is that human beings become what they repeatedly affirm. Ali's greatness was not predetermined. It was cultivated, spoken into being, and defended in the face of mockery and hatred. He refused to internalize inferiority, refused to shrink into silence, refused to let others define his story. His life teaches that belief is not passive optimism but active defiance. To believe in yourself is to engage in a struggle against doubt, both internal and external, until the world adjusts to the truth you have already claimed. Ali teaches us that identity is an act of courage. It is the willingness to speak greatness even before it is visible, to proclaim beauty even when the world calls you ugly, to hold on to faith even when doubt surrounds you. His philosophy of self-belief therefore challenges us not to wait for recognition from others but to begin the work of recognition within ourselves. Hey, quick pause here. I want to tell you that there's a real person behind this video putting a lot of work into it. So if you're enjoying the journey, drop a comment and let me know your thoughts or suggest the next personality to make a video about. And don't forget to hit subscribe so you won't miss the next deep dive. Alright, let's get back to it. Muhammad Ali's philosophy was never limited to words. His famous boasts were real because they were tied to sacrifice, to a daily commitment that would break most men. He once said he hated every minute of training, but he chose to suffer in order to live the rest of his life as a champion. That single idea contains the essence of his philosophy of discipline. Ali knew that greatness is the product of embracing suffering voluntarily, transforming pain into power, and mastering the body through relentless will. He did not glorify ease. He glorified the ability to endure what others would not. His greatness was carved out of early mornings, aching muscles, endless repetitions, and the refusal to surrender to fatigue. This philosophy is radical because it stands in opposition to comfort. In a world that values shortcuts, Ali insisted on the long road. He understood that pain was not an obstacle but a teacher. He viewed sacrifice as investment. Every moment he spent in exhaustion was a deposit in the bank of future victory. Every sacrifice of comfort was a step toward immortality. This is not simply about boxing, it is a way of thinking about life. To Ali, sacrifice was the price of greatness in any domain. Without discipline, words collapse into air. Without discipline, dreams rot into regrets. Ali's philosophy of discipline was grounded in the relationship between the mind and body. He understood that training was more than physical conditioning. It was psychological warfare with the self. Every morning run before sunrise, every extra round on a heavy bag, every push against exhaustion was a test of who controlled whom. Was the body in charge, or was the mind? Ali believed that the body would always beg for relief, but the disciplined mind refused to obey. The mind, armed with belief, forced the body to continue. For Ali, this was the real fight. Before he ever faced Liston, Frazier, or Foreman, he fought himself, and he won by training until his body could no longer resist his will. His discipline created a new definition of freedom: freedom from weakness, freedom from laziness, freedom from the ordinary limits of flesh. Sacrifice, to Ali, was never wasted because it forged resilience. When others took the easy way, he did not. When others quit, he kept going. This refusal built not only his strength but also his confidence. He knew when he entered the ring that no one had trained harder, no one had suffered more, no one had prepared with greater dedication. This confidence was not delusion, it was earned through sacrifice. That is why his boasts carried weight. He did not rely on luck, he relied on the fact that he had already paid the price. Ali's philosophy also reveals a deeper truth: discipline is not merely physical or mental, it is moral. His refusal to be drafted into the Vietnam War, even at the cost of losing his title and years of his prime, was another form of discipline. He sacrificed glory, money, and the best years of his athletic career for the sake of principle. That was discipline of a higher order, the discipline of conscience. He trained not only his fists but also his soul. He could resist not only fatigue but also temptation. He could endure not only punches but also exile. Discipline, in his view, was the ability to hold on to what you believe is right, even when the world punishes you for it. Ali's philosophy of sacrifice also meant rejecting superficial rewards. He did not chase temporary comfort or hollow praise. He sought eternal meaning. He gave up the fleeting security of obeying the government to claim the deeper security of living with integrity. He gave up years of earnings to hold on to his dignity. He gave up temporary popularity to stand with truth. His sacrifice elevated him beyond sports. It made him a symbol of courage in every struggle where principle demands cost. His life shows that sacrifice is not loss but transformation. What is given up in the moment is reborn later as honor, respect, and immortality. This philosophy resonates far beyond the boxing ring. For anyone who seeks to create, to achieve, to transform, Ali's lesson is clear. Discipline is freedom. Sacrifice is power. The willingness to endure hardship today creates the possibility of triumph tomorrow. Greatness is not talent alone, but talent multiplied by the ability to persist when talent alone is not enough. His discipline teaches that suffering is not to be avoided but mastered. His sacrifice teaches that meaning is worth more than comfort. Muhammad Ali shows us that the disciplined life is not a life of deprivation but a life of abundance. By sacrificing the trivial, one gains the essential. By enduring hardship, one earns the right to inspire. His philosophy therefore compels us to re-examine our own relationship with sacrifice. What are we willing to suffer for? What are we willing to give up to become what we claim we want to be? Ali's life gives us the uncompromising answer: everything, if the cause is worthy. Muhammad Ali's life is an instruction manual in courage. Courage for him was not simply the absence of fear, but the mastery of it. He admitted fear many times, but he never let it govern him. To him, fear was natural, but submission to fear was unnatural. The philosophy he lived was clear: fear is a signal, not a sentence. It tells you where the challenge lies, and courage is the decision to step directly into it. Every fight he accepted, every stand he took, Every moment he put his body and reputation on the line was an expression of fearlessness. But his brand of fearlessness was not recklessness. It was calculated bravery, rooted in the conviction that his cause, his belief, and his mission were worth more than his comfort, and sometimes even more than his life. Ali's courage was physical, and the boxing ring displayed this vividly. To stand face to face with Sonny Liston, who was thought of as an invincible monster, required more than skill. It required a refusal to bow to intimidation. Ali's courage here was rooted in his belief in himself. The crowd doubted, the media doubted, even friends doubted, but Ali's self-conviction was unshakable. His courage came from faith in his training, faith in his destiny, and faith in the righteousness of his path. He understood that courage is contagious. When he danced in the ring, when he dropped his hands and dared his opponents to strike, when he moved as if untouchable, he was not only intimidating them, he was demonstrating to the world that courage changes the energy of any confrontation. Courage bends reality, because courage disrupts fear. Yet his philosophy of fearlessness was not only about the ring, it was far greater in his stand against injustice and authority. When he refused to be drafted into the Vietnam War, he demonstrated courage of a different kind, moral courage. He risked prison, he sacrificed his title, he faced being hated by millions, but he stood firm. He declared that he had no quarrel with the Viet Cong, and that he would not betray his faith or his principles for anyone's approval. This was not bravado, it was fearlessness rooted in conviction. He understood that true courage often looks like defiance to the majority. He knew that standing alone requires more bravery than standing with a cheering crowd. By risking everything for conscience, Ali expanded the definition of fearlessness. It was not merely about surviving punches, but about surviving persecution with dignity. Courage to Ali was also tied to truth. He believed that to speak truth openly, even when it offends power, is a higher act of bravery than winning a fight. He spoke about race, injustice, poverty, and inequality without apology. He did not fear the consequences of his words because he valued authenticity more than safety. He saw that fear silences the masses, but courage gives voice to the voiceless. This is why his speeches mattered as much as his punches. His fearlessness liberated others, because he showed them that one man's courage can shake entire systems of oppression. Ali's philosophy of courage was also spiritual. He saw fear as a test from God. In his view, fear is placed before you to measure your faith. To walk through fear is to prove your trust in divine destiny. This conviction gave him the ability to remain calm in storms that would crush others. He believed he was chosen for a mission, and if that mission required sacrifice, he would embrace it. To him, courage was not optional, it was his duty. Fearlessness was not arrogance, it was alignment with his purpose. Ali's philosophy also reveals that courage must be constant, not occasional. It cannot appear only in moments of spectacle. It must be a way of life. He showed courage in every decision, from standing against racism to refusing to accept limitations placed on him. His very identity as a proud black Muslim man in America during the 1960s was itself an act of courage. Every time he walked into the public arena, he faced ridicule, hostility, and hatred. Yet he smiled, boasted, rhymed, and carried himself like a king. This was not denial, it was defiance. His courage was a shield, and his fearlessness was an announcement, I will not be broken. But Ali's philosophy of courage is not naive. He acknowledged pain, risk, and even the possibility of failure. His greatness lies in the fact that he chose courage anyway. He accepted that he might be beaten, but he refused to be intimidated. He accepted that he might lose everything, but he refused to betray his principles. He accepted that fear would always exist, but he refused to obey it. That refusal is the core of his philosophy. Fear is universal, but courage is a choice. Fearlessness is not gifted, it is built through practice, belief, and sacrifice. For Ali, courage was not about denying mortality but about transcending it. Every time he entered the ring or challenged authority, he knew he could be destroyed, yet he moved forward. This is why his life resonates as philosophy. It teaches that to live fully, one must confront fear again and again until it no longer controls the path. Courage, in Ali's terms, is not a momentary spark but a permanent flame that lights every decision, every step, and every sacrifice. Muhammad Ali understood before almost anyone else that identity is the foundation of power. Who you believe you are determines how you live, how you fight, and how you endure. His entire philosophy rested on a radical commitment to shaping and owning his identity, regardless of what society tried to impose on him. For Ali, self-belief was not an accessory to greatness, it was the very engine of it. Without self-belief, no skill, no strength, and no talent could reach their full expression. With self-belief, even impossible odds became surmountable. When Ali declared, "I am the greatest," it was not merely arrogance or performance. It was a conscious act of identity creation. The words were a spell, repeated until they became reality. He knew that the mind is the architect of destiny, and if you do not write your own script, the world will write it for you. Ali refused to let others dictate his identity. He refused to be Cassius Clay, the name given to him by a history of oppression. He chose Muhammad Ali, the name that reflected his faith, his heritage, his independence, and his spiritual alignment. This choice was not just a personal act, it was a declaration of war against imposed identities. It was the philosophy that says, you have the right to define yourself, and once you do, the world must adjust. Self-belief was Ali's strongest weapon. He trained his mind as fiercely as he trained his body. His affirmations were more than showmanship, they were rituals of identity reinforcement. When he shouted his greatness, he was not only convincing the world, he was convincing himself. This was philosophy in practice, language as the sculptor of identity. He showed that repeated declarations of self-belief solidify inner reality until the external world has no choice but to recognize it. Ali lived the principle that identity is not discovered, but built, and self-belief is the mortar that holds it together. The power of identity in his philosophy is tied to authenticity. Ali did not seek to become anyone else. He embraced his uniqueness, even when it made others uncomfortable. His style in the ring, his dancing feet, his trash talk, his refusal to fight like others wanted him to, was an extension of his self-belief. He trusted his own vision even when experts said it would never work. This philosophy teaches that originality is the truest form of strength, and identity should never be diluted to satisfy the expectations of others. Ali proved that to imitate is to weaken, but to fully embody your own identity is to become unstoppable. Identity for Ali was also communal. He carried his identity not only for himself but as a mirror for others. As a proud black man in America during an era of segregation and discrimination, Ali's declaration of greatness was an act of representation. He showed millions of people who had been told they were less that they too could be more. His self-belief was contagious. It transmitted possibility into the hearts of the oppressed. His philosophy here is profound. Self-belief is never only about you. When you believe in yourself publicly and unapologetically, you open the door for others to believe in themselves too. Ali's identity became a symbol, and his self-belief became a torch others could see in their own darkness. Ali's philosophy also reveals the danger of identity imposed by external powers. He understood that those who control your identity control your destiny. This is why he rejected being called Cassius Clay after converting to Islam. For him, names, labels, and identities carry chains or wings, depending on their source. His defiance was not only personal pride, it was a philosophical stand against submission to narratives created by others. He taught that liberation begins when you name yourself, define yourself, and believe in that definition more deeply than anyone else believes in theirs. Self-belief, for Ali, was not blind optimism. It was a practical force. He trained harder than anyone, but his belief made his training meaningful. Without self-belief, discipline fades. Without self-belief, effort collapses under doubt. His philosophy was that the mind and the body must be trained together, and identity is the bridge that connects them. You cannot perform as a champion if you do not believe you are one. Ali showed that belief fuels stamina, that self-identity fuels resilience, and that the way you see yourself determines how long you can endure suffering. But Ali also acknowledged the fragility of identity. He knew the world would try to tear it down at every turn. Critics mocked him, institutions punished him, commentators dismissed him. Yet his philosophy demonstrates that identity is not about avoiding attacks but about reinforcing your foundation so attacks cannot penetrate. His self-belief was armor. Every insult, every doubt, every attempt to strip him of dignity only made his identity more unshakable. This teaches that identity must be defended daily, because the world constantly attempts to redefine you in its own terms. Ali's self-belief was also cosmic in scale. He did not merely believe in his boxing ability, he believed in his destiny. He framed himself as chosen, as designed by God for greatness. This was not ego, it was alignment. He believed he was meant to be more, meant to shine, meant to influence. When you tie your self-belief to purpose, it becomes nearly indestructible. Even when he was stripped of his title, banned from boxing, and vilified, he never abandoned his belief that he was still the greatest. Why? Because his self-belief was larger than circumstance. It was grounded in identity, faith, and mission. In the final analysis, Ali's philosophy of identity and self-belief is a map for anyone who wants to live with authenticity and power. It says, declare who you are, reinforce it daily, defend it against attack, live it unapologetically, and tie it to a mission greater than yourself. Do this, and you become unshakable. Self-belief, as Ali showed, is not arrogance, it is survival, it is liberation, and it is the soil from which greatness grows. Muhammad Ali's greatness was not built only on words, nor was it secured merely by talent. It was carved in sweat, forged in pain, and maintained through relentless discipline. His philosophy of discipline and sacrifice goes deeper than training routines or athletic regimens. It is a way of living, a worldview in which greatness demands a constant exchange. You must give up comfort to gain mastery. You must surrender the present to own the future. You must suffer willingly so that glory can arrive when it matters most. Ali famously admitted that he hated training, that every moment of it was agony. Yet he also said that if he suffered now, he would live the rest of his life as a champion. This statement reveals the essence of his philosophy. Discipline is not about liking the work, it is about doing the work regardless of feelings. Sacrifice is not about losing, it is about exchanging something lesser for something greater. Ali embodied the principle that temporary pain is the investment for permanent legacy. The discipline Ali demanded of himself was brutal. He trained when his body screamed for rest. He ran when others slept. He pushed through exhaustion until his muscles gave way, then found another gear of spirit that carried him further. His philosophy here is clear. Discipline is not measured by effort when you feel strong, it is measured by effort when you feel broken. To Ali, discipline was not a matter of motivation but of identity. He trained because he was the greatest, and being the greatest meant living with discipline as a law, not as a choice. Sacrifice, in Ali's philosophy, extended far beyond the boxing gym. He sacrificed years of his career, his titles, and millions of dollars because he refused to compromise his principles during the Vietnam War draft resistance. This act reveals a deeper truth. Sacrifice, for Ali, was not only physical, it was moral. He showed that true discipline means aligning your actions with your values, even when the cost is unbearable. His philosophy teaches that you cannot call yourself disciplined if you only sacrifice for convenience. Real discipline demands that you endure the ultimate sacrifices when they matter most. Ali also redefined what sacrifice meant in terms of fame. He sacrificed the comfort of being universally loved in order to be authentic. He chose to be hated by some rather than betray himself. This is discipline at the psychological level, the ability to endure rejection, isolation, and scorn without bending. His philosophy here demonstrates that sacrifice is not just about suffering in the body, but about standing alone when others walk away. To give up comfort, to give up approval, to give up acceptance, this too is part of the philosophy of sacrifice. One of the most profound lessons from Ali's life is that discipline is not glamorous. What the world saw were the dazzling fights, the knockouts, the victories. What the world did not see were the mornings of soreness, the endless miles of running, the strict diets, the countless hours of repetition. Ali's philosophy teaches that the invisible grind is where champions are built. Greatness is a public performance, but it is created in private sacrifice. His discipline was a hidden fire that fueled the brilliance on display. Ali also believed that sacrifice was not merely about subtraction but transformation. By giving up ease, he gained endurance. By sacrificing comfort, he acquired resilience. By enduring pain, he discovered strength. His philosophy echoes an ancient truth: the more you give up, the more space you create for growth. Sacrifice is the alchemy of greatness. It turns suffering into skill, discomfort into power, hardship into wisdom. Ali lived this principle so deeply that every bead of sweat became an offering to his destiny. His discipline was not without purpose. He understood that training was not about muscles, it was about the mind. The hours of sacrifice conditioned his spirit to remain unbreakable. In the ring, when punches landed and fatigue clawed at him, it was not merely his body that held on, but his disciplined mind. His philosophy shows that sacrifice strengthens the will more than the flesh. It trains the spirit to endure beyond what seems possible. Discipline becomes a mental fortress, built brick by brick through repeated sacrifice. Another crucial element of Ali's philosophy was his refusal to sacrifice what truly mattered. While he gave up comfort, money, and even time, he never sacrificed his dignity, his beliefs, or his sense of self. This balance reveals his wisdom. Not all sacrifices are equal. True discipline is not blind surrender, it is selective sacrifice. You must decide what is worth giving up and what must never be surrendered. Ali shows that greatness comes from sacrificing what is expendable while guarding what is sacred. Ali's philosophy also rejects shortcuts. He knew there was no easy road to greatness. Every mile run, every punch thrown, every hour of training was a toll paid to destiny. In his worldview, you cannot cheat discipline. Every skipped day will reveal itself in weakness later. His relentless commitment teaches that shortcuts rob you of greatness, while sacrifice prepares you for it. To live by discipline is to trust that every act of suffering builds unseen reserves that will emerge when they are most needed. At its core, Ali's philosophy of discipline and sacrifice is a spiritual teaching. It says that greatness is not about talent alone, but about how much you are willing to give up for it. It says that every moment of pain, every ounce of suffering, every deliberate act of self-denial is an offering to the life you are building. For Ali, discipline was the proof of belief. If you say you are great, you must show it in your willingness to sacrifice everything that stands in the way. His life proves that discipline is not a burden but a pathway, not a punishment but a purification. Through sacrifice, the ordinary is burned away, and only greatness remains. Muhammad Ali's life was not defined solely by his victories in the ring but also by his defiance outside of it. His philosophy of courage and resistance is one of the most important aspects of his legacy, for it shows that greatness is not simply about conquering opponents but about standing unyielding before forces far larger than any fighter could face. Ali's courage was not reckless bravery, it was a conscious choice to resist injustice, to resist conformity, and to resist any force that sought to diminish his dignity or silence his truth. His philosophy teaches that courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision to act despite fear, and resistance is the refusal to bow even when the cost is unbearable. Ali's resistance during the Vietnam War era stands as one of the boldest acts of moral courage in modern history. When he refused induction into the draft in 1967, he knew what awaited him: prison, exile, financial ruin, and the scorn of millions. Yet he stood firm, saying he would not fight for a government that denied him basic rights at home. In this act, Ali redefined courage not as charging into battle but as refusing to participate in a war he saw as unjust. His philosophy reveals that true resistance is not about fighting every fight, it is about choosing the right fight, the one that aligns with your deepest convictions, even if it leaves you isolated. The courage Ali displayed was not abstract. It was tested daily in the fire of criticism. He was stripped of his heavyweight title, barred from boxing for years in his prime, and condemned by the press. For many, the temptation to yield, to apologize, to bend under pressure would have been overwhelming. But Ali's philosophy teaches that courage is consistency. It is not a single moment of boldness, it is the daily refusal to surrender. Ali resisted not only the government but also the crushing weight of public opinion, proving that the hardest resistance is not against enemies but against the pressure to betray oneself. Ali's philosophy also expands the meaning of resistance beyond politics. He resisted stereotypes about what a black man could say or do in America. He resisted the expectation that an athlete should stay silent about matters of race, war, and justice. He resisted the idea that champions belong to the crowd instead of themselves. His life teaches that resistance is an act of self-definition. It is the refusal to let others script your identity. By renaming himself Muhammad Ali, he rejected the legacy of oppression tied to his birth name. In doing so, he showed that resistance begins with reclaiming the right to define who you are. Courage, in Ali's philosophy, was inseparable from sacrifice. He knew that resistance always comes with a price, and he accepted that price willingly. This is where Ali diverged from hollow posturing or empty rebellion. His courage was real because it was costly. He lost years of earning potential, titles, and status. He endured hatred, suspicion, and threats. But his philosophy teaches that courage without cost is an illusion. True courage is proven only when you risk losing everything. Resistance is not about shouting against power when it is safe. It is about standing firm when the consequences could destroy you. Ali's resistance was not fueled by hatred but by principle. He resisted injustice because he loved truth. He resisted oppression because he loved freedom. He resisted silence because he loved dignity. His philosophy reveals that courage is not born from rage but from love, love of self, love of justice, love of the possibility of a better world. Without this foundation, resistance becomes reckless or destructive. But rooted in love, courage becomes transformative, capable of reshaping societies and inspiring generations. One of Ali's most powerful lessons is that resistance does not have to be violent to be strong. His refusal to fight in Vietnam was an act of non-violent defiance, yet it shook the American establishment. He proved that saying no could be as powerful as throwing a punch. His philosophy aligns with the wisdom of spiritual leaders like Martin Luther King Jr. and Gandhi. Resistance grounded in principle is stronger than any weapon. Courage, in this sense, is the mastery of restraint, the ability to remain firm without surrendering to bitterness or violence. Ali's courage also extended to the personal battlefield of illness. Later in life, when Parkinson's disease began to rob him of speech and movement, he faced it with the same unyielding resistance he showed in the ring and in society. His philosophy teaches that courage is not limited to the dramatic stage of politics or sports, it is also revealed in the quiet endurance of suffering. To face decline, to live with dignity in the shadow of disease, to continue inspiring others despite physical limitation, this too is resistance, perhaps the purest kind. The philosophy of courage and resistance that Ali lived is ultimately a challenge to every individual. It asks, what do you stand for? And what will you resist? Will you conform to the easy path of silence, or will you speak even when your voice shakes? Will you surrender to fear, or will you act in spite of it? Ali's life answers these questions not with theory but with example. He resisted the greatest powers of his time and emerged not merely as a champion of boxing but as a champion of conscience. His courage teaches us that greatness is not found in avoiding struggle but in choosing it deliberately, for the sake of truth. Ali's philosophy of courage and resistance is a beacon for those who face oppression, injustice, or doubt. It declares that fear will always exist but that fear does not rule unless you obey it. It declares that resistance may break your body, but it will free your soul. And it declares that courage is not about being invincible, it is about being willing to stand alone, unbent, unbroken, until others find the strength to stand beside you. In this way, Ali's philosophy transcends boxing, transcends even politics. It is a human philosophy, one that calls us to resist anything that diminishes our dignity and to have the courage to live as we truly are. To understand Muhammad Ali is to understand that his philosophy extended far beyond fighting and into the realm of performance. Ali was more than a boxer, he was a living work of art, a man who understood that life itself could be staged as theater, poetry, and spectacle. His philosophy of performance and artistry reveals that greatness is not only about what you achieve but about how you embody it, how you present it, and how you elevate the ordinary into something unforgettable. Ali teaches us that performance is not fakery, it is truth magnified, character amplified, and the human spirit revealed in its most dramatic form. Ali's boxing style was the first canvas on which he painted his artistry. He called it float like a butterfly, sting like a bee, and this was not simply a catchy phrase, it was a philosophy of combat that emphasized grace as much as power, rhythm as much as force, timing as much as strength. Where other heavyweights relied on brute force and aggression, Ali danced. He turned violence into elegance, footwork into choreography, punches into poetry. His artistry lay in showing that boxing did not have to be a crude exchange of blows but could become a dance of strategy, creativity, and beauty. His philosophy reminds us that artistry is the transformation of necessity into expression. But Ali's performance extended beyond the ropes. He understood the theater of the mind as well as the body. His trash talk, his rhymes, his bold declarations of victory before fights even began, these were not mere provocations but performances crafted to unsettle opponents and captivate audiences. He transformed press conferences into stages, where he performed confidence so powerfully that it became reality. His philosophy teaches that artistry is not confined to the arena, it is the ability to shape perception, to make words and gestures as powerful as actions. Ali was an actor in the grandest play of sport, and he wrote his own role with brilliance. Ali's artistry also carried a deeply philosophical dimension. He saw himself not only as a fighter but as a poet, a prophet, a messenger. His verses were often playful, but they carried meaning. They embodied rhythm, imagination, and confidence. By making poetry part of his identity, Ali elevated the fighter from brute to artist. His philosophy reveals that artistry is not about creating illusions but about revealing deeper truths through expression. He made people see boxing differently because he made them feel boxing differently. Performance became a way of reframing reality. The artistry of Ali was inseparable from his understanding of image. He knew the power of presence, of charisma, of spectacle. When he entered arenas, he did not merely walk. He commanded, he glowed, he became larger than life. His robes, his movements, His speeches were all part of a grand composition. His philosophy of artistry is the recognition that humans are drawn not only to deeds but to symbols. Ali made himself a symbol of speed, of beauty, of confidence, of defiance. He was not only performing for entertainment but also performing identity. In his performance, millions of marginalized people saw reflected their own pride, their own resilience, their own possibility. Yet Ali's philosophy does not reduce performance to mere showmanship. For him, performance was authenticity magnified. He was never pretending to be someone else, he was intensifying who he already was. His boasts were real because they came from genuine self-belief. His poetry was true because it expressed the rhythm of his mind. His artistry was powerful because it was rooted in his essence, not in a mask. His philosophy teaches that the best performances are not lies but truths expressed in ways that people cannot ignore. Ali also showed that artistry is about timing. In the ring, he mastered the art of waiting, of patience, of striking at the perfect moment. Outside the ring, he mastered the timing of words, of silence, of gestures. He knew when to provoke and when to inspire, when to mock and when to uplift. His artistry was not chaotic, it was calculated, deliberate, precise. This philosophy reveals that performance requires not only creativity but discipline. The greatest artistry often comes from mastering rhythm, from understanding when to hold back and when to explode. Even Ali's physical decline became a kind of performance, not in the sense of pretending but in the sense of embodying grace in the face of suffering. When he lit the Olympic torch in 1996, hands trembling with Parkinson's disease, the world saw not a man diminished but an artist still at work, communicating courage through his very vulnerability. His philosophy of artistry shows that performance is not limited to moments of triumph, it is also how you carry yourself in moments of fragility. The body may weaken, but artistry endures in the way one faces time itself. The philosophy of performance and artistry, as Ali lived it, teaches us that life is not only about survival or achievement but about expression. It asks us, how do you carry yourself? How do you turn the struggles of your life into something others can feel and remember? Ali's life reminds us that every act, every word, every gesture can be elevated into artistry if we approach it with intention, with imagination, and with authenticity. Ali's artistry turned him into more than a boxer, more than an athlete, more than even a champion. He became a cultural icon because he treated life itself as performance. His dances in the ring, his verses outside it, his charisma in interviews, his courage in politics, all were part of a seamless performance of a man living his truth on the largest stage possible. His philosophy shows us that artistry is not an addition to life, it is life lived with intensity, creativity, and courage. Ultimately, Ali's philosophy of performance and artistry challenges us to see ourselves as performers too, not in the sense of falseness but in the sense of expression. We are all given a stage, our work, our relationships, our daily interactions. The question Ali poses is, will you shuffle through life unnoticed, or will you perform with grace, courage, and artistry so that your presence cannot be forgotten? Ali's answer was clear, and his life remains the proof. Muhammad Ali's philosophy is incomplete without understanding how he viewed transformation and legacy. For Ali, greatness was not static. It was not a single victory, a single title, or even a single era of dominance. Greatness was the ability to evolve, to reinvent, to rise again after falling, and to turn one's life into something that continues to inspire long after the body weakens. His philosophy of transformation and legacy is about refusing to be defined by one moment or one limitation. It is about continuously becoming more than what the world expects and leaving behind a story larger than yourself. Transformation was at the core of Ali's identity. He was born Cassius Marcellus Clay Jr., but he chose to transform into Muhammad Ali, embracing a new name, a new faith, and a new vision of himself. This was not simply a symbolic gesture, it was a radical act of self-definition. Ali taught that transformation requires courage, for it means rejecting imposed identities and daring to create your own. He showed that becoming yourself often requires breaking away from what others demand of you. His philosophy reveals that transformation is not weakness or instability, it is strength, a refusal to remain bound by the past when you know your future demands more. In the ring, Ali's career was itself a story of constant transformation. He began as the dancing young champion, dazzling with speed and elegance. Then, after his years of exile from boxing during the Vietnam War era, he returned as a more strategic, resilient fighter, employing the famous rope-a-dope tactic to defeat George Foreman in the Rumble in the Jungle. Later, even as his speed faded, he transformed again, relying on grit, cunning, and heart to carry him through grueling battles. His philosophy teaches that transformation is the essence of survival and success. When circumstances change, you must change too, without losing the core of who you are. Ali also transformed the meaning of what it meant to be an athlete. Before him, athletes were expected to entertain, to compete, to stay silent about political or social issues. Ali shattered that expectation. He showed that an athlete could be a philosopher, a protester, a spiritual figure, a symbol of resistance. His transformation expanded the role of athletes in society, paving the way for future generations who would use their platforms not just to win but to speak. His philosophy reminds us that transformation is not only personal, it can be cultural, reshaping how the world understands entire professions or communities. Legacy, for Ali, was inseparable from transformation. He understood that legacy was not about holding on to power forever but about what you leave behind for others to carry. Legacy is the continuation of your influence even when you are gone. Ali's legacy is not only the fights he won but the courage he displayed, the identities he defended, and the way he inspired countless others to stand tall. His philosophy shows that legacy is not measured by trophies but by how deeply you touch the spirit of others. Ali also teaches that legacy is not simply inherited, it is built, choice by choice, action by action. He consciously cultivated his legacy not through vanity but through vision. He wanted to be remembered not just as a great fighter but as a great man, a man of conviction, a man who lifted others. His humanitarian work later in life, his global travels as a goodwill ambassador, his symbolic presence in moments of history like lighting the Olympic torch, all these were deliberate acts of legacy. His philosophy reveals that building legacy requires intention. It is the art of shaping how the future will remember you. An important dimension of Ali's philosophy of legacy is humility. Though he was the loudest in his boasts, he was also the quietest in his giving. Much of his charitable work went unpublicized. He visited hospitals, spoke to children, donated generously, all without seeking headlines. His philosophy shows that true legacy is not about fame but about service. It is about how your actions uplift others, even when no one is watching. In this way, Ali's transformation from a brash young champion into a global humanitarian embodied the highest expression of legacy, using one's gifts for the benefit of humanity. Ali's struggle with Parkinson's disease further transformed his philosophy of legacy. Where others saw tragedy, he embraced purpose. His suffering became a testament to endurance, to facing decline with dignity, to showing that even when the body weakens, the spirit can inspire. He turned vulnerability into strength, transforming illness into another chapter of his story that spoke to millions facing their own battles. His philosophy teaches that legacy is not about perfection or eternal strength, it is about how you face imperfection, how you live with courage even in weakness. Ali's legacy is also one of hope. He represented, for African Americans and oppressed peoples worldwide, the possibility of dignity, of rising against injustice, of refusing to bow. His voice echoed not only in sports but in politics, in civil rights, in culture. His legacy is not confined to one nation, it belongs to the world. His philosophy reminds us that legacy is not about being remembered by everyone but about being remembered by those who need your example the most. Ali's legacy belongs to every young person told they cannot rise, every marginalized voice seeking strength, every fighter in life who needs to know it is possible to stand tall. Ultimately, Ali's philosophy of transformation and legacy teaches us that greatness is not about permanence, it is about evolution. You transform, you grow, you stumble, you rise again, and through it all, you leave behind a trail of light for others to follow. Ali's story is proof that even in decline, even in silence, even in death, a legacy built on courage, artistry, service, and truth will continue to live. Ali once said, "Champions aren't made in gyms. Champions are made from something they have deep inside them, a desire, a dream, a vision." This vision, carried through his transformations, secured his legacy. His philosophy challenges us. What will you transform into, and what legacy will you leave? Muhammad Ali's philosophy was never only about fighting, politics, or even legacy. At its deepest level, it was about spirit and humanity. He believed that the measure of a person was not only in their strength or their achievements but in how deeply they touched the lives of others and how they embodied the spirit of compassion, faith, and shared humanity. Ali's life, especially in its later chapters, became a reflection of this broader philosophy, that greatness without spirit is hollow, and that true humanity lies in recognizing our connection to one another. Ali's understanding of spirit began with faith. His conversion to Islam was not simply a change of religion but a declaration of spiritual identity. It was his way of saying that his life belonged to something greater than himself, that his victories and struggles were part of a larger divine order. His faith gave him discipline, grounding, and a sense of purpose beyond the ring. Ali's philosophy teaches that spirit is the foundation upon which all human achievement rests, and that without spiritual grounding, even the greatest success feels empty. But for Ali, spirit was not confined to religion, it was the essence of inner life. Spirit was the fire that allowed him to rise after defeat, the voice that told him to keep fighting when the odds seemed impossible, the strength that carried him through the silent battles of illness and aging. His philosophy shows that spirit is the invisible force that sustains us when the body is weak and the world is against us. It is the belief that there is something within us that cannot be broken. Ali's philosophy of humanity was rooted in empathy. He believed in the power of kindness, in the need to see the world not only through one's own eyes but through the eyes of others. He visited hospitals, encouraged children, spoke gently with fans, and took time for those who had little to give him in return. He lived as though humanity was not a burden but a gift, a chance to give light to others. His philosophy shows that humanity is the ability to connect beyond barriers, to honor the dignity of every person you encounter. One of Ali's greatest human qualities was his refusal to dehumanize even his opponents. Though his trash talk was legendary, often mocking and theatrical, it was always part of the performance rather than cruelty. In truth, he respected those he fought, often befriending them after battles. His philosophy reveals that humanity does not mean the absence of conflict but the presence of respect even within it. Ali's humanity shone in his ability to fight fiercely while never forgetting that those across from him were also men, also brothers in the human story. Ali's struggle with Parkinson's disease further deepened his philosophy of spirit and humanity. As his body weakened, his spirit grew stronger, and his humanity became more visible. He no longer needed to prove himself through physical dominance. Instead, he proved himself through dignity, endurance, and quiet strength. His illness stripped away the illusions of invincibility, revealing the raw truth of human fragility. But rather than diminish him, it elevated him, making him a symbol not of conquest but of resilience. His philosophy teaches us that humanity is not about denying weakness but about living with it gracefully, showing others that even in suffering, there is dignity and meaning. Ali's humanity also manifested in his activism beyond race or nationality. He traveled the world, meeting people across cultures, using his fame to highlight causes of justice, poverty, and peace. He became not only a champion for African Americans but for oppressed peoples everywhere. His humanity was global, rooted in the belief that all people are part of one human family. His philosophy insists that humanity has no borders, that compassion and justice must extend to all. A key part of Ali's philosophy of humanity was forgiveness. He carried no long grudges, even against those who had mocked or opposed him. With time, he made peace with former rivals, critics, and even with the US government that once tried to destroy his career. His philosophy teaches that forgiveness is an act of humanity. It is the refusal to let bitterness control you, the choice to move forward with open hands instead of clenched fists. Ali also believed that spirit and humanity were inseparable from joy. Even in the darkest moments, he laughed, played, and uplifted others with his wit. His humor was not only entertainment but philosophy. It was his way of reminding the world that the spirit thrives not only on courage but on joy. Humanity, for Ali, was not about solemn duty alone but about the lightness of laughter, the warmth of a smile, the ability to bring joy into the lives of others. In the end, Ali's philosophy of spirit and humanity can be summed up in his life's greatest paradox. He was both the most boastful and the most humble, the fiercest and the kindest, the strongest and the most vulnerable. He embodied the contradictions of being human and embraced them fully. His philosophy reminds us that spirit is not about perfection but about authenticity, that humanity is about living truthfully, embracing all that we are, and giving our best to others. Ali once said, "Service to others is the rent you pay for your room here on earth." This was the ultimate expression of his philosophy. Spirit without service is incomplete. Humanity without compassion is empty. To Ali, the true measure of greatness was not how high you rose but how many you lifted with you. His philosophy of spirit and humanity remains one of the most enduring lessons of his life, that beyond strength, beyond fame, beyond glory, what makes us human is the love we share, the kindness we show, and the spirit that keeps us alive even in the face of suffering. Muhammad Ali's philosophy cannot be confined to boxing rings, political protests, or even the span of his own life. It extends beyond those boundaries into the eternal, becoming part of the universal human conversation about meaning, courage, justice, and love. His words, his choices, his victories, and his sacrifices are more than biography, they are philosophy lived in flesh and blood. In Ali, we see what it means for a person to live not only for themselves but for something larger, for ideals that transcend mortality. Ali's eternal philosophy begins with courage. He showed that courage is not simply facing punches in the ring but facing rejection, ridicule, and exile for standing by principle. His courage teaches us that to be truly free, one must be willing to lose everything. That lesson endures far beyond the 1960s or the world of sports. It remains a universal call to resist conformity, to speak truth even when it costs comfort, and to live as if freedom is worth more than applause. Ali's philosophy of justice remains eternal because injustice never disappears entirely. His willingness to sacrifice his title for his beliefs is a timeless lesson in integrity. He proved that real greatness does not come from what the world gives you but from what you refuse to compromise. His defiance against the draft, his demand for equality, and his insistence that his life had to be lived on his terms continue to echo in every struggle where people demand recognition of their humanity. Ali's eternal philosophy reminds us that justice is not a gift but a fight, one that each generation must take up in its own way. Ali's eternal philosophy also rests in identity. He declared that he would define himself, name himself, and live as he chose. He showed that no society, no system, and no authority had the right to dictate the meaning of his life. This philosophy is not limited to one culture or nation, it is a universal declaration of selfhood. His insistence on identity was both a personal triumph and a collective liberation, teaching us that dignity begins with naming ourselves and living as we truly are. Perhaps the most enduring part of Ali's philosophy is his understanding of love. Love was woven into everything he did. Love of his people, love of truth, love of God, love of humanity. Even when he fought with flamboyance and words that cut, underneath was a spirit of connection. Ali did not see his opponents as enemies but as parts of the same human family. He reached out across divisions, across nations, and across differences, guided by the belief that love was the only force that could bind humanity together. In this sense, his philosophy is eternal because love itself is eternal, the one value that survives all time and circumstance. Ali's eternal philosophy was also tested in the crucible of suffering. Parkinson's disease transformed him, stripping away his voice and mobility but revealing his deepest strength. Through silence and weakness, he taught that true power is not measured by fists or shouts but by endurance, grace, and peace. His illness became a final philosophical statement that greatness is not about winning forever but about enduring with dignity when the body fails. His suffering was not defeat, it was revelation, showing the world that humanity shines most brightly in vulnerability. Ali's life is a philosophy of paradox, and that is what makes it eternal. He was both brash and humble, both fighter and peacemaker, both revolutionary and clown. He embodied contradictions and refused to resolve them because he understood that human life itself is contradiction. His philosophy endures because it mirrors our own struggles. We, too, are strong and weak, proud and afraid, defiant and fragile. Ali showed us that to live fully, one must embrace all of it. The eternal philosophy of Muhammad Ali is also one of service. His famous line, "Service to others is the rent you pay for your room here on earth," is perhaps the clearest summary of his worldview. It is not victory, wealth, or fame that make a life meaningful, but service. Ali's life was proof of this, for even after the cameras faded, he continued to serve through quiet gestures, acts of kindness, and the example of his endurance. His eternal philosophy reminds us that the measure of life is not how brightly you burn for yourself but how much light you give to others. Ali's story lives on as philosophy because it transcends the specific details of his era. His fight for justice echoes in every protest, his courage inspires every person who dares to stand against the crowd, his endurance strengthens every soul who suffers silently, and his love binds together all who seek unity across differences. Muhammad Ali is no longer only a man, he is a symbol, a living philosophy made eternal through memory, story, and the universal truth of his example. In the end, Ali's eternal philosophy can be distilled into a simple lesson: live with courage, fight for justice, claim your identity, endure with dignity, and serve with love. These principles, embodied in his life, do not die. They remain as living wisdom for anyone who seeks to know what it means to be great not only in the eyes of the world but in the truth of the human spirit. Ali's name may fade with time, but his philosophy will remain eternal, whispering to every generation that true greatness lies not in what you conquer but in how you live, love, and serve. For Muhammad Ali, training was more than exercise. It was spiritual preparation. His legendary words about hating training but loving the result reveal a philosophy that greatness is born not from enjoyment but from commitment. Discipline, for Ali, was proof that the mind could rule the body. He showed that enduring hardship in private was what made brilliance possible in public. His training philosophy remains a universal lesson that success is the product of invisible sacrifice, of countless hours no one sees, of sweat and struggle that build character. Ali's relationship with his body was both intimate and transcendent. His body was his tool, his art, his battleground, yet he never reduced himself to mere flesh. He spoke often of God, of destiny, of spirit guiding muscle. His philosophy teaches that the body is temporary but the spirit eternal. By fusing the two, Ali lived as a reminder that true greatness is harmony between physical excellence and spiritual purpose. His example urges us to honor the body not for vanity but for service to a higher calling. Ali's voice was as famous as his fists. His rhymes, taunts, and declarations were weapons that shifted psychological battles before a punch was thrown. Yet in the final chapters of his life, silence became his teacher. Parkinson's quieted him, and in that quiet he revealed another kind of wisdom, the philosophy of presence without words. His life showed that speech can inspire, but silence can sanctify. Ali embodied both, teaching us that philosophy is not only in what is said but also in what is endured without expression. Ali was not content to live only for his own time. He spoke of changing the world, of being remembered not only as a champion in the ring but as a champion of people. His philosophy of legacy teaches that a life's meaning is not in its possessions or even its victories but in what it leaves behind for others. His fights, his defiance, his service, and his resilience built a legacy that stretches across borders and generations. He showed that legacy is not an accident, it is the deliberate shaping of one's life as a story for others to inherit. When we step back from the fights, the speeches, the controversies, and the triumphs, what remains of Muhammad Ali is not only the story of a boxer but the unfolding of a philosophy lived in motion. He transformed the ring into a stage, his voice into a sermon, and his life into a parable. Ali's philosophy was not locked in books or footnotes. It was written in sweat, in bruises, in laughter, in sacrifice, and in the unyielding courage to stand for something greater than himself. His philosophy begins in the courage to name oneself. By rejecting the name imposed upon him and embracing Muhammad Ali, he declared that the human being has the right to define his own identity, to align himself with his values rather than be chained by history. That simple act reverberated across culture as a philosophy of self-liberation. It taught that one cannot live fully if one lives by someone else's script. Ali's philosophy continues in the embrace of paradox. He was boastful and humble, fierce and gentle, warrior and peacemaker. His life was a living testament to the truth that human beings cannot be reduced to one quality, one role, or one image. Ali's philosophy was that to live authentically is to accept contradiction as the fabric of being human. He carried contradiction proudly and used it to shatter expectations, reminding us that identity is fluid and expansive. In his refusal to fight in Vietnam, Ali gave the world a philosophy of moral defiance. He stood against the machinery of state, wealth, and even his own profession, losing years of his prime. Yet in losing, he gained something greater. He showed that philosophy without sacrifice is empty, that beliefs are tested only when they cost something. His refusal was not only political but metaphysical. It was a declaration that the conscience is sovereign, that no external power can demand betrayal of one's soul. Later in life, Ali's philosophy matured into one of compassion and service. From the Olympic torch to his quiet charity work, he became a symbol not of defiance alone but of healing. His trembling hands became more powerful than his lightning punches, because they embodied acceptance, dignity, and perseverance in suffering. In his silence, the world heard a new sermon, that philosophy is not always about brilliance of words but about the way one inhabits fragility with grace. The eternal philosophy of Muhammad Ali is that greatness is not a title conferred by others but a life lived in alignment with truth, courage, and compassion. His victories remind us that power is real, but his struggles remind us that meaning comes from enduring beyond power. The body fades, the titles are archived, but the spirit that refused to bow, the spirit that proclaimed "I am the greatest" and then proved it by giving himself to others, remains untouchable. Ali belongs not just to boxing but to philosophy because he answered the oldest questions in human history through action. Who am I? What must I stand for? How do I face suffering? What do I leave behind? His life gave answers, not by abstract reasoning but by lived example. In this way, he joins the ranks of those whose philosophies are inseparable from their existence. To remember Ali is to remember that philosophy is not confined to bookshelves or ivory towers. It is lived in the ring, in the streets, in the choices we make when the world presses hardest against us. It is written in the refusal to betray conscience, in the courage to name oneself, in the endurance of pain, and in the love extended even when strength fades. Ali's final gift is the lesson that philosophy is not about escaping life but about entering it more fully. His life was a poem of defiance, a sermon of compassion, and a story of transformation. And as long as people look for courage, for meaning, for dignity in the face of hardship, the philosophy of Muhammad Ali will continue to fight for them, whispering from eternity, live boldly, live truly, live with love.